If you like to read, if you like to think, if you like to see the world differently, grab yourself a book, give this show a listen. Purple Lit Nerd gonna show you what you're missing. Welcome to the Purple Lit Nerd podcast for December the 2nd, 2017. Can you believe it's December already? Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, this year's, I don't know, I'm having this weird year where on one hand it's like, oh my gosh, it's already December, what? But at the same time I'm going, what do you mean, it's still 2017? I feel like it's 2025, oh my gosh. So, it's hard to believe it's December, but it's also hard to believe that it's only been about 1 year. Anyways, I am your host, the amazingly adorkable Rebecca Thistle. Obviously adorkable. Podcasting to you live-ish from my kitchen table in my house, which I call Thistledew. Yes! So, that applause, that little, I know it's just a little sound button, and it's a sound bite, and it comes by default in my Spreaker app and all that, but it always makes me feel so important. I'm not important, but it makes me feel important, so I guess that's the point. Anyways, so before we go any further, I have to say, because people get really anal about this, spoilers ahead. If you have not read American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and I'm talking actually read the book, not seen the TV show, read the fucking book. This is not the Purple TV show reviewing podcast. This is the Purple Lit Nerd podcast. So if you have not read the book, go no further. Okay, there will be spoilers ahead. This is seriously a no holds barred thing. So we're going to talk about Shadow Moon today. Shadow Moon. Clearly not his real name, and I have listened and re-listened to this Fakasta book, which is not that Fakasta, but it's awesome. But I've reread it probably about 2 times in the past 2 weeks. And every time I listen, I gain some small little insight into Shadow's character, and I'm determined to try and figure out if there's hints as to what his real name actually was, because when he's hanging on essentially the world tree, he gives up his name to Zoria Polinichnaya. I don't know. The Slavic gods, we'll get into this later on, the Slavic gods' names, just bleh. God bless the Slavs, but you have a complex language. Alright. And, evolved into things like modern-day Russian and Polish and whatever the fuck else they speak out there. Anyways, so he has a real name, but I don't think we know it. I may at some point 10 years down the line go, aha, that's probably what his name is, but right now, he's just Shadow Moon. I don't know why. I do know why. I think it's a really cool name. If I could, I would birth another child into this world and name it Shadow Moon. Shadow Moon Thistle, can you imagine? Anyways, so yes, but he's a very interesting character. I feel he's, for all intents and purposes, he's the protagonist. He's the hero of this story, really. He saves the day and stops the war between the old gods and the new, because all it was going to do was benefit Odin and Loki, and God have mercy. Anyway, so he's a protagonist. The story is told from a third-person limited point of view, and it primarily focuses on Shadow, though there are other sections where we get insight into Laura's mind. There's moments when we have insight into Mr. Town's mind. There's various moments where we get to see other points of view, but it's always third person limited. So, but it's primarily limited to Shadow, really. So who is Shadow Moon? Let's talk first about his physical appearance. There's not a lot of description on his physical appearance, and I think that's a good thing and a bad thing, because it makes him hard to picture. But at the same time, it means he could basically be anything within certain parameters, because when we're first introduced to him in the beginning of the novel, right before he gets out of prison, he is described as being big enough and looking don't fuck with me enough that people left him alone in prison. He had a relatively smooth prison term, 3 years in prison. There are, I think, several references to him having gray eyes. There's 1 or 2 references to him having black hair, or dark hair at least, because that could be black or just really dark brown, really, but dark hair. I can't think of a single time when there's any reference to how long his hair is. I think there is one part where it's described as being straight, and there's only one reference, to my knowledge, of his skin color, and it is described as being coffee and cream. Which I'm sort of, I'm befuddled by this, because, as we learn in the book, his father is Odin, and Odin makes very clear, Odin, Mr. Wednesday, the American idea of Odin, Mr. Wednesday, is his father, and Wednesday makes it very clear in chapter 2 or 3 that he likes young, blonde-haired women. And so there's no description of what Shadow's mother looks like, but with this kind of darker complexion and this, not necessarily the darker hair, but because usually, anyways, but with that, you kind of gotta go, what? Obviously, it doesn't matter, it's just trying to form a picture in your head, and then I have some theories about it, and maybe one day I'll read this book, and it'll suddenly, all click in my head together, but as of right now, I can't see what his mom would look like, but anyways, I'll get into some more of that later. So that's kind of what he looks like. What does he act like? What's his temperament? He generally tends to be very reserved. His name, Shadow, is actually a nickname. We find out that that comes about because growing up with his mother being a translator for the UN or something, and he's bopping around from embassy to embassy all over Europe, he doesn't associate well with children his age, so he tends to like to be in the background around adults. And so he's sort of a shadow to his mom in a lot of ways. And then when he gets on board with Wednesday and this whole crazy adventure that he has planned, he kind of shadows Wednesday everywhere. And and it's really funny because he doesn't really seem to come into his own and be his own person until he's pretending to be Mike Angel in Lakeside, really. Well, actually, no, I think to a certain degree, you see him being less of a shadow in Cairo when he's staying with the Egyptian people in the funeral home and that whole crazy thing. But really, like, he ceases to be a shadow when he's being Mike Angel. Anyway, so his temperament is generally very, like, cool and calm and reserved, and I can't think of a single instance when he actually loses his temper in the book. And maybe I'm not thinking hard enough, but I can't think of one. So he's generally, like, pretty relaxed. Like, he gets angry, but he tends to let, I guess, his physical strength do the talking more than anything. But aside, so he's sort of reserved and all that, but he's got he's like, there's so much more to him, and I feel like there's only a fraction of shadow that we really get to see, and that fraction isn't enough. It's just not enough. He's like an iceberg, and it's like, I want to understand the fullness of who you are, but there's so much underneath the surface that doesn't get explored. And I think that's good. And I think that's good from a writer's perspective, because that leaves a lot of avenues open for especially now that they've made this into a TV show on Starz, that leaves a lot of room open for the showrunners over there to play with the character and to let them do all this crazy stuff. And, and Neil Gaiman can sit there and go, yeah, alright, groovy, let's do this. Because only he really knows the character, and even then he's left a lot of room for himself. But it's really good from a reader's perspective, especially a LitNerd like me, going, I must understand you. Let me find more clues and more hints, and let me tear this apart, and it's a real mystery. So there's a lot. His temperament is generally that there's more to him than what you see. So let's talk a little bit about some of his special skills, like his talents. Obviously, the big one is the coin tricks. And I want to do a whole show about the coin tricks, because there's so much significance to coin tricks, I feel, in this story. But obviously there's a lot of cunning that goes into being able to do coin tricks and any illusions like that, magical illusions, if you will, properly. So, but he has this real skill for role-playing, play acting. We have two big instances of that, one smaller than the other. The biggest, of course, is when he's being Mike Angel in Lakeside. And he takes up that mantle and that character very wonderfully, and oftentimes forget that he is Shadow Moon, or whatever the hell his real name is. We never find out. I don't think. Maybe someone listening to this has figured it out please email me, send me a message.